the initial ideas of the EU or EP funding directly, or managing even some kind of broadcasting structure that would deliver messages to our neighborhood countries, I think is something that I was allergic from the very start, and I'm even more allergic now, so I'm comforted in that respect. And the idea of us focusing more on supporting the creation of platforms and providing also activists with the skills that they need, possibly with a lot of emphasis on peer-to-peer kind of interaction rather than sort of top-down support, I think is an important message that I will take back with me and share with the colleagues in the European Commission. Somebody mentioned DigiDeco. We are very closely cooperating with them, so I think these kind of messages are important to bring back. I also think that the emphasis on empowering local actors allows us also to be more flexible, to more responsive, to be more attentive to what are the local needs and the local requirements and conditions. I think there's no recipe that fits all the situations that we've been discussing. We talked about Egypt, we talked about Iran, they're very different cases in my view. And this doesn't mean that we are forgetting, that we're falling into this trap of relativism, that we say that values are not universal, not at all, but I think the values are the same as, bloggers testify. We see that, when in certain dialogues we have with countries which are, let's say, less receptive to our messages, when we have dialogues with them, their reply is that, your values are not necessarily our values, you should put them in our context, we are not as developed as Europe, we might be 100 years back, etc., etc. I tend to retort that this is not the reality, they just need to listen to their own people. However, I think the emphasis varies from country to country. And if I had to make a reproach to ourselves, is that perhaps in our interaction and in our discourse when we talk about democracy, we placed perhaps too much emphasis on political and civic rights and forgotten a little bit also social and economic rights. In a country like Egypt, for example, I think it does matter that democracy is seen not simply as a system that produces or guarantees equality between different between gender equality, or equality for LGBTI people, or so on and so forth, or democracy being simply identified with the discourse on what kind of constitution we should have, but it should also be seen as the best system that can allow people to participate in the decisions which are taken and which have an impact on their lives. And I think that we should perhaps try to pass that message as well, because too little was said. And I remember listening sometimes to activists coming from Tunisia saying, you're just concentrating on the discussion on the constitution, but there's people who actually also want jobs, and they don't see the benefits of all this. They don't see the benefits of the revolution in terms also of the quality of their life. And we should make them understand that democracy is also the best way of promoting development, economic growth, and stable economic growth and prosperity. Somebody talked about, it was Alex, I think, talked about also not forgetting artists and creatives. It's kind of weird how sometimes there are coincidences in life. I was reading just now a report from one of our delegations, one of our embassies abroad, that they were trying to organize for, today is Human Rights Day, they were trying to organize for Human Rights Day an event involving artists and using the topic of artistic freedom as a way of approaching the issue of freedom of expression, etc., and how the authorities banned this event. So they were quite aware of the implications that sometimes artistic events can have. And I think that, in a way, although it's a negative example, confirms that we should use all channels, including these, to promote these kind of initiatives. I was also pleased to hear that there was not the usual emphasis only on public diplomacy, on sanctioning, but also on the need to, and against this approach that we Europe are the good and the others are the bad, and therefore we teach ex cathedra what the others should be doing, because we have some very difficult cases. People talked about the deteriorating situation globally, and that's absolutely true. And it's visible not just in terms of statistics, journalists killed, or laws which are being adopted which are restrictive in terms of NGO activities, in terms of access to internet, etc. It's also true in multilateral fora. You quoted the situation in the Human Rights Council, where we still managed, however, through intensive outreach to pass important messages. However, it is true that, let's say, those countries which do not share our values are becoming more and more vocal and more organized. So we definitely, in my view, have to change attitude. The policy of sanctioning, and there I turn also to Mauricio, because sometimes I see this very much in resolutions passed by this institution. The policy of kind of sanctioning and dictating in a very peremptory fashion to partner countries what they should do and what they should not do, I think can be very counterproductive. We have to say clearly when violations occur, but maybe we have to find a way also of engaging, and the idea is that we should engage with youth organizations, we keep channels open at academic level, expert level. This is something that we have in mind very, very much in case of dialogues we have with countries. I won't single out countries, because if you single out one, then the others will say, why did you single out me and not so and so. Just one additional element. We have some guidelines on freedom of expression, which are, in my view, very, you mentioned them, Richard. They're very detailed, and I think they're quite comprehensive. They foresee practical measures for addressing violations of freedom of expression, preventing violations of freedom of expression, and supporting developments that enhance freedom of expression. The critical phase we are in now, and that's going to be very much the emphasis of in the years to come, is on implementing them. I think that's something that we are particularly aware of, and that's why only last week we organized a forum here in Brussels with NGOs from all over the world with the specific topic of freedom of expression online and offline. I agree very much with what you were saying about also us being credible and having the legitimacy to interact with partners on democracy and human rights issues only if we sort ourselves out internally. And I think that's very much another topic that we want to put on the table. I have to say that the new structure of the Commission, the Juncker Commission, in my view, will help in that respect, because it really tries to break the compartmentalization that existed in the previous Commission between different policies. There really is an effort to create clusters, and there's also is the role of Timmermans, your co-citoyen, who has really an overview of everything which comes out of the Commission in terms of its compatibility with the Charter of Fundamental Rights, which I think is a pretty good text. We only need to apply it. So the idea of having internal mechanisms of, we have already the Fundamental Rights Agency, which is doing an excellent job. We just need to operationalize what the Fundamental Rights Agency does. Because it's absolutely true, whenever we go and you know, we have human rights dialogues with over 40 countries a year. I've chaired now a few, and it is obvious that our partners, as I said, are becoming bolder, and therefore they challenge us and they tell us, you know, well, what, you know, you're asking me to why we've adopted this kind of law. Well, you know, one of your member states, or more than one, have adopted legislation which places more emphasis on security rather than freedom. And I totally agree with you that already the language of saying striking a balance between security and freedom is the wrong approach, because you can't put freedom and security on the same scales. Yeah, we need both, exactly. Reinvigorating the EU digital agenda, that's for sure, because I agree that if we talk about means of communication, and I don't see them as us building or developing the means of communicating our values to partner countries, but us supporting local actors develop the means of communication that they need in order to, you know, create a pluralistic environment and allow the population in that country to have access to different information and not just, you know, information coming from the authorities. So the digital agenda is something that we really need to work on in the context of our human rights and democracy action plan. You said we shift priorities, and this results in gap of funding. We had an example recently. It's very difficult for me to comment on that, in the sense that our effort now for the next years to come is to make a clear distinction between those areas where we have consolidated working methods and where people work together, where there is synergy, where you know, the different stakeholders are fully committed and have made that part and parcel of their work, and concentrate our action on those areas where we see that not all the stakeholders are playing ball, or where there are new challenges, or where we didn't manage to, you know, achieve the objectives that we wanted to achieve. So the idea is to focus, but you know very well that when you are in a process of consultation, when you have different stakeholders, when you have 28 member states, and you have the European Parliament, the final result might not be as focused as you wanted. And it's very difficult afterwards to choose, you know, in terms of, I'm thinking about the European Instrument for Democracy and Human Rights, which has different thematic strands, you know, to choose which one takes priority. We have to have a serious debate also with the Parliament on this, I think. But I take your point. This projectitis is something that we should be fighting. Just one final thing. I take your point that, you know, if you look at blogs, if you look at tweets, you know, who are the most popular people that are followed. The most popular tweeters are followed in Egypt, for example. No, followed in absolute terms. I don't think that is necessarily an indicator of the prevailing view in a country. I mean, it can be, but we have to take it with a pinch of salt, because we should also bear in mind that perhaps there are also class barriers in these countries, and that when we talk about social media, we reach a certain portion of the population, but not also in terms of age, in terms of, you know, economic background, etc. In terms of urban versus rural. So I think we have to be conscious of that, and we should try to develop ways of reaching out and being relevant also to those actors. My last one. Sorry, it was a bit random, but